Good afternoon, everyone. You are standing right here in this beautiful, cute little circle. And you look very far away and you see something you really want changed. It can be big, it can be trying to protect the environment, it can be helping child poverty reduce, but it can also be something very simple and very personal to you, like finally agreeing on the rules of Uno with your friends. And it's somewhere there, you can see it. You can see it right there at the exit sign. You just have to follow it. But between you and that change you want to see in the world, there is this space, there's this gap, and it's full of people and different perspectives. All of you are in that gap, you can see. Different perspectives, different people who believe that change should look a different way. And that we should reach it in perhaps a different way. Someone would say that we should run real fast and we should just jump and see how far we can get. And another person might be a little bit more careful and say that we should try to do it calmly and we should take it step by step and calculate every single move we possibly can make. And then there's always this one uncle who believes we shouldn't try because we're all gonna die anyway. But you can see it and you really want to reach it. So how do we bridge this gap of all these perspectives in order to reach that change? I don't know about you guys, but every single time I look on the TV, I see this pattern of people. The loudest people usually get handed the microphone the most. They get listened to so much and they scream and you can see it, and sometimes you agree and sometimes you don't. But it seems as if the entire narrative is about the people who scream the loudest. You can feel small because of that. As if the voices that you cannot hear are not important in the story of reaching that change. But those voices are not silent. They're just not being handed a microphone, but they are full of ideas and visions. And perhaps the best idea to world's craziest problem lies in the minds of those who were not able to be heard yet, or ones that we don't want to listen to. In order for us to actually reach the change we want to see in the world, we shouldn't only listen to the voices that are loudest, but also to the voices that are being kept quiet. So how do we bridge towards social change? How do we build that bridge? I will tell you that today. I promise, I think you promise. And usually this would be the moment where I would tell you why I am credible enough to give this speech. Why should you accept whatever I'm saying? But I'm gonna do something crazy and something that seems simple, but somehow has become a bit more difficult and crazy, which is that I'm asking you to just be brave enough to listen to me and be brave enough to trust. Because my story started with the exact opposite of that. It started with not being listened to and not being trusted. If we go back in time, very far, we go back around approximately 15 years. And suddenly the Dutch government had this amazing idea of combating tax fraud. And obviously that sounds like success. Except it really wasn't. And instead of only catching criminals, they falsely accused 50,000 families. And for years, fighting against the system that had no face, all of these families had to live a life where suddenly, from the one day to the other, they were in debt with money they didn't even steal. They had to pay back 10,000s of euros, 100,000s of euros, money that no one even had, but somehow had to come from somewhere. And with that, people's lives changed. For 50,000 families, it was suddenly reality to live life with minimum expenses, try to spend as few amount of money as possible, and try to survive. And it became normal. And for me, it became normal, because I am part of one of those families. You see, for me and for 100,000 children, it became so normal to be distrusted. It became so normal to just try to survive, and it became so normal to be creative in answering questions of why you're not there at a field trip, or why you are not coming to a birthday party. It just became so normal to lie, almost. But that was the norm. That was our reality. And it took 15 years and a lot of people trying to scream. People tried to fight back against a system that, again, had absolutely no face. People did not have the strength anymore to fight back, and they fled the country. Children taken out of their homes because obviously financial stress leads to so much more. And some children are not alive today. So how do you move on from there? After 15 years, finally it came to light. National reports, Amnesty International, even the European Union, they all showed what people have been screaming and trying to tell people for 15 years now, which is that we are innocent. And we did not do anything to deserve this. And then you have a choice, and you have to look at what happened, and you see more reports and more reports come forward. Because apparently it wasn't just fun and games and picking out random people who were falsely accusing. It was based on algorithms the government implemented based on your last name. There was racial profiling to figure out what people might probably commit fraud, and that's why we're gonna say that they're guilty even though they're not. It's really that simple. So for me, this was my reality. And when it finally came to light, I still felt the shame. And I also felt like my life wasn't even that bad, honestly. I was very grateful, and alhamdulillah, to this day, I am so grateful for everything that I do have. At least I had shoes, I thought. Wow, back in the day, putting on my fake Converses, purple with blue. 2 sizes too small though, because I was too afraid to ask my mom for money for a new one. At least I still had a roof above my head, because at least I would stay warm at night, I thought. While waking up in the middle of the night, feeling the wind through the walls, as if it's trying to tell me that it lives in my house too. At least I had a car, I thought. I thought, wow, we were in the car, and we're driving, and we're being super annoying, because obviously 4 children in the back of the car, like, that's not always fun and games. But at least we had a car and we were driving somewhere when a cop stopped us, pulled us over, and took the car because of our unpaid debt. And we all knew the truth that day, which was that 4 children and their mom were stranded on the side of a highway in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter, with no way to go. That was our reality. And I was done being quiet. When I saw that it finally had a face, I finally knew where everything came from, I could not say anything, or I could finally do something. I will take my microphone, I thought to myself. So I wrote this beautiful letter, because I am so academically excel. I wrote this letter saying that I felt that children and young people were not being taken seriously in this entire crisis. I believe that we deserve a voice, even if no one here wanted to listen to us. And that one letter led to a Zoom meeting, because it was in the middle of COVID, the best time of our lives. And in that Zoom meeting, I found the trust back. The entire scandal was based on distrust and not listening to anyone. But suddenly I found this group of people who shared these experiences, and I did not feel ashamed. I started sharing more and more about my life, and the more we talked to each other, the more we realized that every single child and every single young person deserves to be listened to in this. This is our path. This is what happened to us. So people should listen to us instead of just babbling and yappa 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 in the parliament. It's about us. And our community grew and grew, and we shaped our form. We became our own entity, which is now a beautiful foundation. It's called Stichting Gelijkwaardig Herstel, and I know that Dutch sounds like liberation, but it means equal and a just recovery, because that is what we deserve. And only we can decide what we need, how we need it. No one else can tell me that. And as we grew and we grew, we had more different perspectives. We tried to voice our voice and try to amplify it. And the more we created our own entity, and I learned to speak to different types of people, the more we all realized that this wasn't just a problem within our political scandal. This was applicable to everything we see. We've built so many different systems. We've come to depend on so many different processes. We claim to want to change the world, but at the same time, we've built bureaucracies and politics and policies that fail to include the voices of the people it is actually about, and the people whose voices are being kept quiet. Everyone deserves a voice, and no one should feel ashamed to share it. And I'm so grateful to have found a group and a physical place that protects the neutrality and protects that my word counts. And I am so grateful to have earned the trust of all the young people and all the children and all the adults, the parents, of everyone, to keep every single day sticking up for these voices, for our voices, because it matters. And the more I was working, the more I realized it was everywhere, and it included so many more different systems. For example, how is it possible that we have so many systems, so many projects to prevent child poverty, but most of them don't include children? Or how do we have so many debates on protecting the environment while completely failing to include the voices of the people who really needed a car to go to work, needed cheap gas, and able to afford food? We can't just choose to listen to certain voices and then ignore the others. We cannot do that if we really want to see that change happen. We need to include every voice, because every voice matters, and not in a way that we listen just to wait for our turn to speak. And it might be ironic because I'm on there's a doubt right here. But we need to actually listen without a judgment. And without assumption, because assumptions kill so many things. Sometimes I think, honestly, that I am the smartest person in the room. And I have to remind myself that that is not true. And you probably also every now and then think that you are the smartest in the room. But you cannot build anything you do on assumptions. And we have to be sharp on that and remind ourselves to not slip back in that. It's even if you have the best intentions, sometimes you want to do something and you think, okay, I see a problem, I have a solution, let's do it. But most of the time, within that quick thinking, we forget to include different voices. So we have done that on assumptions. And it's very simple to catch yourself in that. And it's very simple to correct yourself. Because I just made an assumption about you guys thinking you're the smartest in the room. And I can just very simply ask you, was I right? Yes. Did I accident? Oh yeah. And only then we can learn how we make our solutions better and how we build bridges better. We cannot do that just on assumptions. For me, assumptions about my life and what I needed or what I was supposed to need as a child living through such injustice, all those solutions, other people who had crazy cute university degrees, they didn't work for me. I am the real expert, so only I know how we should change things. And I learned that the only way we need to do that, the only way we can do that, is by being brave. Listening can be so scary. It really can be, because sometimes it means that you have to admit that you're wrong. And sometimes you learn things that make you feel uncomfortable. You learn new things that might shift your entire version of reality. So we need to be brave to listen. And we need to be brave to trust. My entire story started with distrust. And I'm not allowing that to continue to be the end of my story too. I am the example of what happened when people build things from distrust. We cannot do that anymore. Me personally, I can't. So we have to start doing things based on trust. When we introduce ourselves to one another, we immediately say, hey, my name is Zahra, and I do this and this for a living. That's what we're so used to, as if that one sentence is going to depend whether or not we're worthy of each other's time. As if that one sentence decides who I am. I am so much more than what fits in one sentence. I can play Candy Crush and Uno, but you don't know that. And if I enter a room, maybe that was valuable. You know, I'm not going to reduce myself to something, to only one thing. We shouldn't want to. We should trust that every single person in this room carries value. We all do. We all are our own catalogs of experiences and information. We're our own catalogs of valuable things, and we should trust that every single one of us today came here for a reason. And that's what we all have in common. And we should really trust on that. So to answer the question, how do we build bridges towards social change? The answer is by being brave enough to listen and being brave enough to trust. I've never believed that when I wrote that letter when I was 17, that it would lead to an entire movement. I never believed that it would change my entire perspective, and I never believed that I would feel brave enough to stand in front of you today to tell stories I was so ashamed of for so long in my life. Because it's not my responsibility to carry that shame around with me. I've learned to turn that shame into my strength, that pain into my strength. And you can too if you are brave enough. So with courage in one hand and trust in the other, I'm asking you, what bridge are you building today? Thank you.